Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to St Mary's Vicarage on this, the 6th of November. Good to see you all. Lovely, bright autumn day this morning. Could see the mist rolling over the Chase, and we've got a lovely, bright day as it brings us into this weekend. And though we're in lockdown, I hope that we're all sort of planning to enjoy the weekend as much as possible. I know we're not going to be able to socialise in the same way that we have been doing over the past few months, or sadly maybe to go and see friends or family. But the weather is looking good this weekend, and of course we are lucky that we can enjoy the beautiful countryside and everything that's around us, and even the coast. There's no restrictions for us to be able to go and take exercise down on the coast. We won't be leaving our county, so I think I might be planning a walk with Mrs. Vicarage tomorrow afternoon somewhere by the sea, I would think. Now, it's really good this morning as I looked at the War Memorial. If you walk past the War Memorial, you'll start to see pebbles are appearing with poppies and remembrance motifs painted on them. They've been painted by First Woodcuts Scout Group. The Beavers, Cubs, Scouts and Explorers have been making these. So the first lot appeared last night. Just to let people in the village know that they are supposed to be there. You know, we may end up with some well-meaning person thinking that they shouldn't be on the War Memorial and they're cluttering it. No, I've given my permission for them to be there, and they are, in a sense, all of our wonderful young people in the scouting community paying their respects in this way, because of course on Sunday, unfortunately, because of the restrictions, they're not going to be able to be present and process up the high street as we have done in previous years. So it's good to see them there. I'd also say, if there's anybody in the village or the community who has a bit of an artistic bent and would want to paint their own pebble to add to the pebbles, we're asking them to go either on the very top tier of the War Memorial or the round the bottom, because it's the middle tier where the wreaths get laid. So if you'd like to paint, people would like to paint their own pebble to add as their act of remembrance, then please do so. Also, if you've purchased the little wooden crosses that have a poppy on, please do feel free over the next few days to place those crosses at the War Memorial. Now, the government guidelines for this Sunday are that acts of remembrance can go ahead, but in a limited way, and those who are veterans, retired service personnel, active service personnel and their families, and civic leaders should attend in person or can attend in person. Everybody else is being encouraged to mark remembrance from their own homes or on their front doorsteps or in their gardens. Now, the hope is that we'll have an air raid siren up here at the church on Sunday, and we will sound that at 11 o'clock, and that will mark the beginning of the 2-minute silence for the whole village, and then the all clear will be sounded. Order of service sheets there. If you go onto the Sixpenny Handley website, you can download the order of service sheets there. They're also being sent out via the church electronic mailing, so copies are also available, or will be from later on this morning, at the back of church as well, if you want to collect copies, so you can follow the act of remembrance at home with your family. We hope it'll also be streamed live on this channel, on Facebook channel, but we appreciate, obviously, if you're standing out in your gardens, you might not be able to watch it as well unless you've got your iPhone or iPad with you. But we hope this way it will enable as many of the community to be involved with our act of remembrance as possible. So that's this coming Sunday. So a few days into lockdown, we're still waiting for the announcement as to who is going to be President of the United States. And as I said yesterday, I watched some of the sort of pundit shows last night and such, like Newsnight and everything. And it is hugely disheartening to see a country that is viewed across the world as a symbol of democracy and freedom, to see senior statesmen, and I don't mean just the current incumbent, the current president, really making a mockery of their own electoral system. It just looks incredibly bad as well, and the madness that's around it. I posted on my own personal Facebook page one of Donald Trump's, I think, Christian advisors, who's an evangelical lady pastor. I don't know what church, probably her own church, whatever. But it's just madness, calling down angels and things like that. That, you know, it really does make my head ache. Anyhow, the most important thing for that nation is unity, and whichever candidate ends up as president, their first and foremost task for that nation is to make that nation feel as one, make that, you know, nation feel as one. We all have different political opinions. I think people have gathered by now I'm no huge fan of our current government, but it doesn't mean that everybody that thinks that supports them, that I think they're just evil. It's not. It's just not necessary. It isn't about. You know, it doesn't need to be like that. We really do need to strive for unity. Not just in America, but also in our own country. Unfortunately, the whole Brexit debate a couple of years ago left this country very, very divided. I heard all sorts of really very difficult stories of people that had been friends for years, but because they had voted one way or another on this particular issue, they now weren't speaking to each other. You know, there's more to, as I said yesterday, there's more to our humanity than whether we're in or out of Europe, or whether we're a Tory government or a Labour government or whatever. And history teaches us that regardless of political colours or rosettes, all politicians have the capacity to do wonderful things or to cock things up incredibly, and that's regardless of their particular the particular colour of their rosettes. That's human nature. But the most important thing I've always thought is, in a sense, not what happens up here. You know, okay, very important decisions are made up here, and they do affect people's lives, and they are life-changing. But how we live together as community in our own villages or towns or wherever we are, how we learn to live together and respect each other and celebrate difference. I've always thought that was really important. When I was at Cambridge, the Theological Federation, which was made up of several different theological colleges, so you had two Anglican ones, you had Westcott House, and then you had Ridley House. One was sort of Anglo-Catholic-y, the other was evangelical. Then you had Westminster College, which was the Methodists. Then there was a Roman Catholic college, and all sorts of things like that. But we all studied together, and we did have some quite different opinions about things, particularly some of the hot potato issues that are in the church at the moment. But I always remember the Cambridge Theological Federation motto, and it was unity in diversity. Unity in diversity. And I always thought that was a brilliant motto, because celebrating difference is a good thing. I don't think we should be afraid of things that are different from us. We can learn in a different way. We can see things in a different perspective. that's one of the reasons I enjoy working with young people so much, because I'm aware as I move into my 50s, I'm developing grumpy old man syndrome, though my wife will say, Kate will say, I've had it since I was 30. But the wonderful thing about working with young people is if you listen to them and you talk to them and you ask them about important things in the world and what they think, you get to see the world through fresh eyes. And it helps us to think, and it opens our minds up to other possibilities. Also, if you meet a stranger, I know meeting strangers at the moment isn't an easy thing because we're not allowed to, but if you meet strangers, particularly people from other cultures and other backgrounds, yes, there are sort of things that you think, oh, well, I might not live my life like that, or I don't quite understand why they dress like that, or this, that, and the other. But when you then sit down and have an open conversation with them, as I said yesterday, you will first and foremost find that you probably have more in common with them than you expect. And that's our common and shared humanity, the things that we care for. And then the beautiful thing is then, if you can have an open conversation, you can learn about where other people are coming from. When I was a professional photographer many years ago, I worked for a short time in a photographic studio in Harrow, just on the outskirts of London. And there were 4 of us that worked in this particular studio. And it was quite interesting. And it does sound a bit like the beginning of a joke. Because there was 3 guys and a lady who was our manager, and we had a guy called David and Shaid. Now David was Jewish, Shaid was a Muslim, and I was a Christian, and we were all practicing. I don't think any of us were sort of on the extremes of our religion, but we were all practicing and faithful people. And I remember with great warmth and fondness sitting with David and Shaid and talking about how important our faith was to us. We talked a lot about prayer and how important prayer was. And yes, we used to tease each other and as well. But we learnt a lot about each other and a lot about how to respect our differences and celebrate our differences, and even though I was only there for a short time, we actively encouraged each other in the practice of our faith. And the 3 of us, more than anything, the thing that came across very, very clearly, and of course, though we're all part of the Abrahamic faiths, which means that we share the Old Testament in that sense. All comes from Abraham, was that the overwhelming thing that came across in our discussions was, in a sense, this idea of love and mercy and service of God and his people. Not the sort of rhetoric that we often constantly hear about through the media and on TV, that anybody who is religious is a bit like the thing I posted on Facebook yesterday. Somebody that's just so off the wall that it has no relation to the heart of the faith whatsoever. And when I left that studio, I wasn't there for a very long time because I was in the process of setting up my own business, and when I had done, I left. That was the thing I missed more than anything, was the conversations and the time that I had with David and Shaid, 3 of us who were faithful people, a Christian, a Jew, and a Muslim, and we got along very, very well. We were all good friends, and we all respected each other. We were interested in each other's faith and in each other's lives, and that's the gift that we can be given if we're all prepared to be open to one another and our differences. I have a lovely friend who was a vicar in Walthamstow, and I had a similar experience when I went to spend time with him, Reverend Stephen Saxby, and he worked very closely with his Jewish and Islamic counterparts in that area. doing an awful lot to deal with the radical ends of things that were there. There was a lot of problem with the far right there, and there were problems with Islamic fundamentalism. But the three of them working together was very, very interesting. And I had a privilege of spending an afternoon with them, and we'd been to see the mayor for a meeting there. And then afterwards, the imam offered to drive Steve and I and the rabbi back to our various houses, but also to give me a little bit of a tour of the area, so I could see the synagogue, I could see the mosque and such like. And again, it was a bit like the beginning of a joke, because you know, there you had an imam and a rabbi and two priests or two vicars in a car. And it was just beautiful. It was very, very friendly. There was a lot of leg pulling about who had the biggest building and all that sort of thing. But here I got to witness these three men knew each other really, really well. They knew their communities really, really well. And what they wanted more than anything was for their communities to live together in peace and unity and to support each other. But as I say, I witnessed the very hard task they had at times of particular factions or outsiders coming into that community, trying to stir up hatred and tension amongst the different religious groups. Things done deliberately. Outside organisations booking speakers in, and I even experienced something that I really couldn't believe, which was one of the problems they were dealing with was that a quite extreme Islamic group had offered a room to a far right group. So you had this extreme Islamic group and this far right group. They were actually working together to deliberately try and stir up hatred and tension in that community. And I have to say, it was a jaw-dropping moment for me to see, in a sense, what I saw as what I really felt was sort of very evil forces trying to come into an area and deliberately cause division and tension among people. But it was good to see those three guys working together, getting on the phones, talking to their communities, talking to the civic leaders, and ensuring that these groups and people did not get a foothold in their community. And yeah, so if only we could try and live like that, that would be great. Anyhow, turning to my book, we haven't had some saints for a few days, but today's quite an interesting one, the 6th of November. It's a saint, not a Roman Catholic saint, once in here, and it's Archbishop William Temple, Archbishop of Canterbury. William Temple was born in 1881 and baptised on this day in Exeter Cathedral. His father was Bishop of Exeter and later Archbishop of Canterbury. William excelled in academic studies and developing into philosopher and theologian of significance. After ordination, he quickly made a mark in the church and at 40 became bishop. Within a decade, he was Archbishop of York. He is especially remembered for his ecumenical efforts and also for his concern for social issues, contributing notably to the debate which led to the creation of state welfare provision after the Second World War. He died in 1944, 2 years after his translation to the See of Canterbury. And I've always thought that's a very interesting thing there with William Temple, because he got very involved with the politics of the day, and he was prepared to challenge governments, regardless of their political affiliation, about their duty to look after and care for the vulnerable in society. And he managed to do that. And I think today I'm always saddened that we don't see are senior leaders in the Church of England doing a similar thing. They sort of don't get involved, or very, very rarely get involved. And I do think that sometimes the role of the Church of England is not to become a sort of another political party or the opposition, but it is there to be a critical friend, and it should remember what's known as the prophetic ministry that we find in the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament, where the prophets would challenge the leaders of their day if they were failing to care for the widow, the orphan, the stranger, as we often hear in the Old Testament. Some of them were exiled and murdered for it, but they spoke up for injustices. And I think the Church of England has shied away from this, and I think there's several reasons for it. I think partly because of the system we have for appointing bishops, that the final say comes down to prime ministers. And many years ago, the tradition was that a list of 3 names would be given to the current prime minister, and the current prime minister would always choose the name on the top of the list. That was the preferred name from the church. But they were, in a sense, given 3 names, so it appeared as if they had a choice. Well, sadly, back in the 80s, that tradition was broken, and not just by the Tories. It was later broken by the Labour Party as well. And what started to happen was that names were being put forward and other names were asked for. It became quite politicised. And I do think now, in some respects, that there is a fear of those who are looking for potential promotion or being forwarded, to sort of keep their head down and not criticise the government of the day, of whichever political party they are, because of a concern that they will then not receive preferment. Now, that's a very blanket statement. I'm not suggesting that's the case, but I sometimes wonder if that's why we don't hear more senior clergy and bishops speaking out about things. And it doesn't need to be party political. It just needs to be just saying something about social justice, which is what William Temple was hugely about. And I know some of you, I don't make apologies. I'm quite a political animal, and I do feel very strongly about social justice issues. And I know we have a Tory government at the moment, but believe me, you would hear me being equally as vociferous if we had a Labour or a Liberal government. And I felt that the poor and the vulnerable were being sidelined, because I feel that that's part of that prophetic ministry which we're all called to as Christians, in a sense, to look out for that. So William Temple, interesting person. And it's very interesting when you look at the history of the Church of England, because until quite recently, it had played a huge role in some very, very big social issues. Probably the last social issue that it got involved with, which might surprise you, was decriminalising homosexuality. Now, you might find that quite unusual, considering the mudslinging that goes on within the church over this issue, but it was actually the bishops in the House of Lords who began to work and table a motion, because what they were witnessing was young men being imprisoned and hearing about suicides and all that sort of thing, because they were gay. And that change, that social change, was really spearheaded by the Church of England. And several years later, they lowered the age of consent. That was the other thing that happened, because they felt that, again, this was ostracising particular groups of people. Sadly, now, I don't see, not just with that issue, I don't see a lot of it happening with other issues. I'm hoping our new Archbishop of York, who I had a privilege of working with for some years, will in time be a bit more outspoken on these things. But hey ho, we shall see. We shall see what happens. But it would be good to see the Church of England being more involved in social issues and social justice. But unfortunately, until it gets its own house in order, I don't think it's going to be very effective at that. Anyhow, let's just have today's reading. I think we'll have the psalm for today. So it's Psalm 121. I rejoiced when I heard them say, "Let us go to God's house." And now our feet are standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built as a city strongly compact. It is there that the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord. For Israel's law it is, there to praise the Lord's name. There were the thrones of judgment of the house of David. So some verses from Psalm 121. Anyhow, I hope you have a really good day today. Do enjoy the weather. Tomorrow at 10:30 there is a short rehearsal for those who are involved with the Act of Remembrance on Sunday, and as I say, on Sunday at about 10 to 11 those involved will congregate at the War Memorial, and we would encourage everybody who can't be there physically to either watch it online or stand in their gardens and take part in that way. Anyhow, let's just close with the grace. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Take care, folks. Do have a good day.